our top performing SDRs were able to handle up to 6 accounts at the same time without the loss of the productivity. Never just bring a problem, because then you would be associated with the person who create those problems. If you bring a solution, that's what makes you a hero of the day.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the SDR Hire Podcast. If you are new here, I'm your host, Stefan, and this is a place where we talk about sales, hiring, getting hired as an SDR, an account executive, and essentially building high-performing sales teams from the ground up. Today, I'm joined by Alla Ivanova. Alla is a business development leader with over a decade experience in marketing, project, people management, sales, and more than 7 years specifically in sales development. Over at a company called Belkins, she rose from you would say a humble SDR to the position of head of SDR, leading a 40-person SDR team that booked over 10,000 meetings a year and helped the company grow towards $100 million valuation. And so we'll dig into how she built the team, how she organized it, the frameworks she used, the performance management, what today is the standard for being a really good SDR. And so without further ado, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. You did your homework.
Tried my
Yeah,
best.
I'm excited to be here today and share some of the tips, ideas, and general my experience.
I love that. Look, there are some, because as everything else in marketing, numbers really attract people. And so I like asking questions about these specific, especially when there are some big numbers. Is it anywhere like publicly acknowledged that Belt has achieved $100 million valuation?
I know that it's definitely out there. It's on LinkedIn. It's in our founder's profile. We've been changing Belkins over the course of, gosh, especially 5 years after the COVID hit, into becoming more global company and not just an appointment setting company or lead gen company, but like more tech holding of companies. I think that's also part of this growth. We try to add additional services, additional products under the one umbrella. That's definitely one of the key factors that allowed us to grow this far.
That's really awesome. You initially started at Belkins as an SDR, and that eventually led to, growing the largest team at Belkins. And so, what kind of mindset shift had happened for you to like move from a performer to land a head of SDR role into like a leader role?
Oh, that's a great question. It definitely has a change in the perspective, since you need to step away from being the top performer and the big star, for example, and you need to let other people shine, people from your team. Now, if you listen to me, I often say we, even it means that I did something. It's one of the habits that I acquired, that results are never just mine. It the team effort. And like another key change is to delegate. It's probably one of the hardest things to learn for any new manager. When you're used to doing things your way, you know the best. And now you need to let other people make these decisions, make even their own mistakes. But that's the only way to let them grow. It's very challenging for me because I love to control stuff, but it's a good like development for you as a manager. It's like a journey when you need to adopt this.
Mm. How did you manage with, because as an SDR, you are only responsible for yourself, and your results will be as good as how much you work hard or how much
Yeah.
you're consistent with your activities, etc. That all changes when you become a manager, because now all of a sudden it's not about like your performance is not the dials and the emails and booked
Yeah.
meetings, it's everybody else's. And so how did you, I mean, I remember how hard it was for me when I was like, well, I mean, I can be as good as I want to. Like, it doesn't matter if I can't really make others achieve same or similar results. How did you manage to kind of overcome that?
You said a very right thing that I actually tried for other people to achieve the same results that I used to have. That was my main goal, to create a system based on our top performing SDRs, how we can make like junior SDRs as good as them. So that was one of the first things that I approached when I became a team leader and then a head of the SDR department, making success a system, figuring out what exact steps do you need to take to be able to say I've done enough. And it's very important things for sales development because it's often hard to hit the perfect results, and you never kind of still this moment when you've done enough, because there is always another email to send, another follow-up to send, another call to take, and you need to have like some kind of almost a checklist that you can cross off and say, I did well. And I saw that if we create these things internally into a bigger like knowledge base, onboarding system, learning paths, that would be like a roadmap for any SDR to succeed.
Hmm. You said that you essentially took the practices of top performing SDRs
Yeah,
and tried to systematize it. So what were those? Like what does a top performer do? At least in a company like Belkins, and obviously we should have started with just explaining what Belkins is for the audience.
of
Belkins
course, of
is,
course.
maybe you can tell us what Belkins is, and then what's a top performer at Belkins?
Sure. So Belkins now is a Martech company, but our prime focus is on the appointment setting business. Everything that leads to appointment setting. That's our usually main KPI for the client that come in. They want to enable their sales department for greatness, and we come in to give them those new opportunities, generate a hot lead for them. So the second part of your question was, who is a top performer at Belkins? What makes this person a top performer? Usually it's a very hungry and driven SDR that never stops, that is very persistent, that has like a very strong work ethics, because you need to do a certain amount of repeated tasks daily, and you need to have a very good system where you almost follow the same schedule for every day, every task, and you should always keep learning and digging for new things to test. And that drives to explore new things. I think it really one of the key features for anyone at Belkins, whether it's an SDR or a marketing professional or account manager. We always try to explore some new opportunities. And if something is not working, we never give up. We keep going, we do our research, we always have a next idea to test. And basically, for our team, we have this internal slogan probably that cold outreach, it always works. It just depends on how much time you're willing to invest into like your testing, and eventually you will get there. There is something that will work for you.
Yeah. Okay, so if I can summarize, essentially, it is being consistent and persistent, doing huge volumes, I assume, and then testing, changing things up until you find the ones that work, right?
Yeah, that's one of the like key factors, but there's also a soft skill part. You need to be really nice person to work with, because we're a team, and I think we have a great support system where like team leaders, colleagues, they always share their knowledge internally, and like peer to peer learning is very important. Like what I said, earlier is that we tried to learn from our top performers. We have this built-in now as a system for growth that anyone will eventually have to make a presentation of what works best for them, for the team, and share their knowledge with the colleagues.
Understood. Okay. And then, you know, you took all of those best practices, you systematized them, tried to at least, and created it into like a playbook for onboarding, hiring, training SDRs. What were some results that you ended up having with a process like that?
Oh, like one of the most notable results was in our first year when I became the head of the department. We've seen almost a 30 percentage points increase in our KPI results across the team. And that was really impressive because before that, we thought like maybe those numbers aren't achievable if you have this many accounts on different life stages and you have like a mixed team with junior and senior SDRs. But we've started hitting those numbers and it was really amazing to see it. That was probably the first part. And the second part was the increased productivity of the individual SDRs. Because when I started, we used to have like few accounts for an SDRs that they managed at the same time. And then after a year, our top performing SDRs were able to handle up to 6 accounts at the same time without the loss of the productivity. And it means the efficiency for the business without losing the efficiency for the client.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, that's insanely impressive. Obviously, Belkins is a lead gen outsourcing SDR outsourcing company. How were you able to have one person manage 6 accounts? Like, what were the activities that this person was doing
As a
that they were using?
Yeah, so like you're definitely a bit limited in the amount of channels that you can use with this system. At that time, our prime focus was on email and LinkedIn outreach. A lot of it you can automate and do simultaneously. Like later on, when we've added calling to the mix, we kind of recalculated that because you cannot scale calling as much. It's always connected to the time you've spent dialing. But if we're talking about like email and LinkedIn, I believe like it could be pushed even further, especially nowadays with the AI software. But you still need to be very careful about it because like at Belkins, we kind of take pride that we are human first company and we try to monitor every piece of content that we send out. That's why this human factor is still very important. Yeah, but there are still like much more new possibilities for improvement. And if we're talking about the particular system that they are needed to adopt to be able to be this efficient, it's building like a healthy routine of habits. Like when do you start your working day? You need to start like the same hours. You always need to check your email. There are particular time slot at the beginning of the workday by US where leads are very active and you need to be in your inbox during those hours because you can catch some responses live and respond to them immediately. But generally, you don't need to be like 24 hours a day inside your mailbox. You just need to know this like user behavior of how people and when they reply to you. So you can focus on those particular time slots. And before that, you try to do all the prep work. For example, most of Belkin's SDRs are in Europe. So we have this advantage hours before the business day starts in US, where we can do all the reports, update the sequences, do our research. And that's how we kind of can squish more kind cannot hear you.
That makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. And you did mention at some point, or at least I found it in the instruction in the research that I did. At some point, you were managing, I think, at its peak around 40 people, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's quite a lot of people for one person to manage. So, what's your secret to like finding, hiring, and onboarding, keeping 40 people on board while maintaining quality? Because it seems like that's what you were able to do.
Yeah, I think we were able to do this. First thing that like it was very important for me to be present on all the interviews with the people we eventually hire because like when I first started hiring people, I didn't really knew the portrait, but with time, I think after the first year, I knew exactly who I want to hire, like more people like Olena. So we built it into the hiring profile for the future SDRs, and I wanted to feel the same vibes even from the person that I knew I want to find for our team. So that was the first part, but of course, like I was not managing 40 people alone because I wouldn't be as efficient. Like you cannot remember all of their project details if you're managing 40 people. So we had a team leader system where I was focusing mostly on strategic work with team leaders, and team leaders were working individually with each SDR. But like we had also like some personal connections with SDRs. I was in all the project chats. I was available for the support. But for example, like weekly one-on-one, I was not covering everything with the 40, team of 40. I was focusing on the team of six, the team leaders, and on our group calls, which I also find very important because when the team grows, you still need to be available for the people, for the individual contributors, and they need to know that they always have a direct line with you. So a lot of my focus was on keeping this direct line still open, especially with a growing team and more new people coming in.
Understood. Interesting thing that you mentioned how you in the first year, you probably made a lot of mistakes hiring people, and you really didn't have a clear picture what you're looking for. But over time, as you were interviewing a lot of people, that changed. So I'm curious, how did that change? So what do you look for when you're interviewing an SDR, like, after all of that time?
And I'm definitely looking for a person who is able to learn and learn fast because everything changes so fast in the cold outreach industry. You need to always test new tools, look for new approaches. And I even ask, like, how do you stay in touch with everything that's going on in the industry? And I want this person to be active on LinkedIn, even if not posting, but at least like present, reading the top voices and staying up to date. That's one thing. And another thing is being able to take action. Even though
Mm.
like SDR works on accounts with a team and we don't really make solely decisions about like the strategy. We have like an account manager. We always consult with a client, but you're the first who sees everything. You're the one who communicates with leads, looks at the data, and you having a voice is very important. For me, it's kind of almost a red flag when person, like when we are describing some kind of case where I want person to say how they would act in this situation, and their only response that they will ask someone. I do want to hear that they will have some sort of plan. And it's also one of the things that I teach my team, especially for them to like being able to advance to a more senior position. And if you see a problem, you need to bring at least your idea of the solution. Never just bring a problem because then you would be associated with the person who kind of create those problems even. And if you bring a solution, that's what makes you a hero of the day.
Got it. Okay, so what you're saying is when you're interviewing them, you would present them with a situation, a
Yeah,
case,
always,
and
always.
you would then observe their response to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I
And
wanna feel that they have ability to analyze the data because in
mm,
the SDR world, it's so important to be able to read these clues that you have like as early as and you have them like being able to run A/B testing, understanding
yeah.
whether your campaign is not working from the responses that you get and which part of it's not working. So, like, I'm looking for this analytical mindset because that's when SDR will be able to give you more value from the responses that they just handle.
Mm. So how do you determine if they have an analytical mindset? Do you ask them a certain question,
Yeah,
or do you
yeah,
just
I do. I do ask them a certain questions, but like most of all, like the most important part for me is like imagining some kind of situation from the day to day SDR lives and just talking about it, seeing what would be their approach to handling it, or where they will go to look for some answers, data, like how they will analyze whether something is not working. You can get such an interesting responses from it. And
Mhm.
sometimes you will see an obvious mistake, especially if someone is junior. Like I do believe that if you like have like a very good logic to you can figure things out even if you have no experience in email. But if you can, that's definitely a good point during the interview.
That's always been very interesting to me, like to talk with other sales leaders of how they recognize good versus bad. I've had my fair share of screw ups when it came to like hiring SDRs. Sometimes I would think that because somebody's long in the role that they're a good fit, and then it turns out that they're kind of just slacked off every job that they had. And anyway, but on the other hand, what I've observed is very important, as very important is the ability of a person to acquire new skills, as the SDR job has been changing for at a very rapid pace for the last
Yeah.
5 years in my experience. And like how has the SDR role changed in your experience, as you've had so many SDRs under you over the last, let's say, 5 years?
Oh, yeah, it definitely changed and changed a lot.
Mm,
I think 5 years ago, it was more straightforward, just like get the leads, send the message, and you'll get some results. And it will be almost guaranteed if you use some kind of framework. And they were a bit less available back then because we didn't have ChatGPT. You needed to research your like literature, your education base. But now, like I think the industry is oversaturated. That's why like everyone is kind of doing the same thing and results drop. So as an SDR, you should always look for new things to test. Like you can never confidently say, I know everything. There is nothing for me to learn. Even if you're a senior SDR, you need to doubt the status and go and have like a new course that you can take or try a new tool, explore a new framework, because like this education, it never stops. And the pace 5 years ago was slower. Like we did
mhm.
have like some major disruption once in the year, but now like you have new software coming out like each week, and it's even hard to test everything. So you should be more tech savvy now, but also you play more roles. Back in the
Mm.
day, you could have been just only cold calling SDR or only doing email outreach. And now you need to be experts in everything, and more than focus even on those things. You need to think strategically. You need to know marketing. You need to know like some psychology, and it became a more complex role. And what I see is that a lot of SDRs, they now become go-to-market strategists. So it's not just how do I send this message to a lead. It's thinking about like a bigger picture.
Makes a lot of sense. I've seen similar things as well. And mm, what I've kind of come down to personally is that I feel like the SDR role has made like a complete circle where in the beginning you had essentially marketing doing some kind of like templatized outreach whatever, then
Yeah.
and SDRs were doing like cold calling essentially, and there were no SDRs. Essentially we had salespeople doing cold calls and then going over to those meetings or like having online meetings etc. Then the predictable revenue playbook came out, and then
Yeah.
everybody started doing kind of cold email outreach, right? And then it was the golden age of cold outreach. You didn't even have to cold call. You would get like 10 meetings out of 1,000 emails
Yeah.
sent, and like
It's a
it
good
was
time.
just see, like that was I caught just the end of it, because soon after I had started as an SDR, maybe a couple of years in, those things kind of started to get saturated. And over the last couple of years we had tools like Instantly and Smartly, where you essentially automate cold email outreach. You have tools like Reach, for example, where you manage multiple inboxes to send cold LinkedIn messages, and then you have cold calling. And I feel like it has made a full circle where again the SDRs are mostly doing cold calling, and then you have GTM folks who are doing like the automations, email and LinkedIn outreach, which kind of makes sense. But it's just funny to observe how the role has changed. And so like when you like if you were coaching somebody today when they're prepping for like an SDR interview, what is like the one thing that they can't screw up?
Understand is the key performance indicators for the SDR. You need to like understand the logic of what SDR does and where to look to understand whether it's working, whether the total
Mm.
reach is performing. Because when someone doesn't know or never uses the say, term open rate, for me, it's kind of like, are you sure you came to the right place? Even though, like, I know a lot of folks nowadays, they turn off the open rate because it can harm some of the diligence. Yeah, I know. But, like, you still need to understand this. What you should look
Mm.
for to analyze a campaign. That's what I want to hear. And also, it's very important for the person to be able to work with technology, like to know the Google Office, to know the Gmail infrastructure, to be able to like set everything up for the campaign, even because if you are like still bad with software, and
Mm.
SDR nowadays uses a lot of software, a lot of tools like
That's right.
Apollos and Info, outreach tools, Lemlist, instantly. And you need to be able to get to know these tools fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you usually hire more experienced people, or do you hire people without experience, like juniors?
I've had different experience in this. So I did hire people where they never worked as an SDR before. Maybe they had 1 or 2 years of any experience after their school, like university usually. And I've hired like mid to senior SDRs who already had like few years up their sleeve of the like SDR experience that were very similar to what we were looking for. But I almost never hired people from another SDR agencies, so just not many of them. Yeah, and like the profile is a bit different, of course, where a person has no experience in SDR role. You need to understand that they know the basics of business communication, because SDR usually emails not just from their perspective, but on clients' behalf. It means adjusting the tone of voice to the person who are you reaching out from, or like who you're reaching out to.
Yeah.
And usually it's a great fit when this person had some kind of maybe support experience, like any role involving like a lot of communication, especially written communication. Since, like, for example, for me, for a long time, like SDR was like a communication in writing first, not the caller. It kind of shifted a bit, but I do still find that a lot of best performing SDRs, they need to be great on the email, now on the LinkedIn, and the profile for those people could be a bit different than the profile for the cold calling SDRs.
Yes, I've observed something similar as well, and it's just interesting to look at that. I know, especially because I am actually surrounded by a lot of SDRs from agencies, because here in Serbia, in the Balkans, there's quite a lot of sales development agencies, outsourcing agencies, and it's essentially the same type of talent. They flow from one agency to another. What I've seen is like SDRs would crush one channel and they would be pretty like weak in other channels. So for example, somebody who's like they're not cold calling, but they're crushing LinkedIn. And so for example, they're getting like
Yeah,
5 to 10 meetings a month with like senior cybersecurity executives just from LinkedIn, which is super impressive, right? Without even picking up the phone. On the other hand,
exactly.
there are folks who are like, I'm not going to do anything other than the phone. Like I
Yeah,
let marketing send emails. Like I want to be a salesperson. I want to call people, which is again just a different type of SDR. The Western world, United States, especially like like older school, like old school types of leaders, they expect the SDR to just sit on the phone, call all day, and then
yeah.
LinkedIn and email are just like secondary.
After thought.
Um, exactly, which doesn't necessarily have to be the case, right? They don't necessarily have to be only cold calling in order to be successful. There are different ways to succeed. But I would honestly definitely say that in this day and age, like you can automate everything. Like it's too expensive, at least in my mind, to give the SDR like, hey, go figure out LinkedIn and emails and no, I would rather have them like cold call and then have a GTM engineer, for example, do the
Yeah.
emails and everything else. What do you think?
Well, I think that you kind of need to analyze what the team you want to build.
Hmm.
There's different approaches to that. Well, for example, from my perspective, like even at Belkin, our account managers were more like GTM engineers. But in order to scale it from the agency perspective, you need to divide roles for each person to take over the little bit for them to like being able to have more accounts that they
Hmm.
handle at the same time. That's why like one person is like covering the strategy, another person is covering the lead gen and like lead validation, another person is covering the tech setup, and the SDR is focusing only on the communication with the prospects that actually like
Yeah.
engage with, or like driving more engagement from the personalized approach. And in this scenario, the productivity is actually higher for the team, but the budget for this big team is also higher.
That's right.
That's why it's sometimes easier to have like one person that does everything, but the results, they would be not as like huge when you like have different people working together. For example, a lot of SDRs that I've interviewed, usually they are also responsible for the lead gen part. So they
Hmm.
research the accounts they gonna reach out to. And like we found that it's one of the most hated jobs for the SDR to do because it's so repetitive. It's not creative. And SDR is almost like a salesperson. they want to have this conversation. That's where they good at. So like at Belkins and in the agencies, we say, hey, let's take away this part from their routine. Let's us use SDRs only for the parts that they are really, really good at.
Mhm.
And at the same time, there could be a few profiles of the SDRs. Some could be very good at strategy, very like exquisite communication notes, and they can write impressive personalized messages. But they're like the researchers, the quiet type, the introverts. They might not be very good at cold calling. And
Yes.
the person that is great at cold calling, one of my best hires, but like, oh my God, they were such a smooth talker, but technology was not their strongest part. And sitting, creating a dashboard in like Google Data Studio or filling in the CRM, the spreadsheets, it was a torture for them. That's why, like for us, it worked to highlight the individual talents of the people. And if someone, as you've mentioned, is great on the LinkedIn, we kind of thought, how can we give more LinkedIn accounts to that person where they
Yeah.
can be the most productive? Things goes with Scully SDR. Like, okay, someone can be.
Yeah. 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 Agreed. That's right. As we're kind of getting to the end and wrapping up, if you were hiring today, what would you specifically look for?
Today, probably I'm gonna look for the person that can do all. It's
Hmm.
just they have more potential in today's market, and you should be able to flip, like switch to another channel once one channel is not working. So I don't want this person to be very stuck at one particular approach, one tool, or one outreach channel.
Interesting.
That's what I will be looking for. And I'll definitely be more focused on finding a tech savvy person who can bring me some innovative solution, how to improve the outreach flow, how can we cut the insufficient processes. Because like if you can optimize your work, if you can even work less and have better results, let's do it. And I always want to scale it for the bigger team. Yeah, that's what I carry me from Balkans. Like I want to scale everything.
So obviously you've left Belkins, and it seems like that happened on completely like positive terms. What's next for you? Because it seems like you're doing a little bit of consulting on the side. Is that kind of your main focus, or what are you looking for? Maybe somebody in the audience might take interest, or maybe just reach out and ask for a little bit of help.
Yeah, so I do love helping individual businesses because I get to know the product. It's something which drew me to the SDR role to begin with, especially at the agency, because you get to be a part of the team from another company, not really working for them, but working with them almost as addition to their company. It's very like cool perspective because you can sit at a lot of chairs at the same time and be an expert in a lot of niches because you get to research each niche you work for. So like I love to help and share some of my experience. How can we improve the processes if they have something in place, or how we can build a strategy for the cold outreach if they're just starting out? How can we create a nice setup according to one's budget, one's ambition, and that they can even grow the system later on individually. So it will be set up for like time to come, time to follow, and they will able to like uh, hire more people to support it if they need to. I really love that part, but as a consultant, there is like another part to it. You don't really own the results as much because you are not very integrated in the team. You get only the information they share with you, and you cannot control the execution because, for example, in the agency, I got to do the QA results, QA checks weekly, sometimes even more often, different reviews. And when you're working with the client, you take on more like educative position, and they might decide not to do something that you advise them to do. So one of the perspectives that I'd love to explore for myself is joining a product team where I can have like more hands-on role where I can accept more things. Plus, before my work at Belkins, before I've concentrated on the sales development part, I've worked for 6 years in marketing agencies, delivering 60 campaigns for advertising, for digital marketing project. And I kind of want to have more influence, probably, especially now, because you feel how much the results are connected, how much a cold outreach is affected by the marketing strategy, by the website, by the communication strategy, everything. So,
Mhm.
like going back to the trend that I've mentioned, yeah, SDRs become go-to-marketing strategies, and I kind of feel that that's where you need to grow and to sit more closely to the marketing side, where you always operate together to drive more results. And you don't then say, it's my lead, it's marketing lead, or it's my lead, it's SDR's lead. No, it works together because even if the email sent or LinkedIn outreach didn't drive the meeting booked immediately, you still run a small advertising campaign within the
Yeah.
channel. Yeah, that person, they got to know your name, your brand, what you do, and they might come back. So it still builds awareness. So it definitely one part of the bigger picture.
Understood. Well, okay. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to get in touch with Alla, how do we get in touch with you? Where can people find you? Are you on
LinkedIn,
LinkedIn? What's your yeah?
of course. Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place to connect. I try to post more actively there. It's something that I've accepted as a New Year's resolution for me. Yeah, at the beginning of the year. So you can definitely find me there. It's Alla Ivanova. Yeah, you can, I think, find me by my beautiful picture.
I'll tag your
Yeah.
LinkedIn profile in the description. And I've very much enjoyed this conversation today and the last time that we spoke. And I think you have a lot of things to share because you've done so many things and achieved so many things. I mean, we haven't went through even half of some of the achievements that you've made over the
You
last
can,
years.
people in the audience can request a second episode of our podcast.
Exactly. Let's drop a comment if you want a second episode. But I really appreciate you for taking the time and sharing. And hopefully, you will find a nice product company that's gonna, provide you a good home and that you can really help them grow. In the meantime, we'll stay connected, and obviously, LinkedIn is always there. And hopefully, we get to do another episode.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been really pleasure chatting with you today. And the time before that, hopefully it would not be our last episode.
No, of course not, of course not. All right, That's a wrap.